73 species went silent at once. Rachel Owe stood at the center of the Chamber of Judgment, her hands steady on the small black device that had just changed everything. Around her, tiered balconies rose into shadow, packed with delegates whose eyes, some slit, some faceted, some glowing soft blue, had all turned to the same point in the air above her head. A star map hung there, red points scattered like blood across black glass. Green lines ran from every one of them straight back to a single small point near the edge of the display. Earth. Your security systems are built to track ships moving through quantum foam, Oe said. Her voice did not shake. Our drives do not use quantum foam. We are invisible to your sensors until the moment we arrive. Nobody breathed. In the row nearest the floor, a Zenthuri commander's scaled hand tightened on the rail until it cracked. 12 years of secret work had led to this room. 12 years, and one impossible machine, and a woman who now stood in front of the oldest government in the galaxy and told them the truth they had spent 20,000 years burying. At the center of the dais, a crystalline figure 2.5 meters tall flickered, his internal light stuttering like a candle in wind. Archontholon of the Chuluth Collective had not felt fear in 3 centuries. He felt it now. This is a violation, he said, and his voice, usually calm enough to fill the chamber without effort, cracked at the edges. Explain yourself. Oe looked up at the star map, at Earth's small blue light, connected to 100 worlds that had never known it could reach them. I intend to, she said. Give me a moment. You're going to want to sit down for this. If you told humanity's first ambassador to the stars that one day she'd stand in front of the galaxy and dare it to blink, she'd have laughed at you. She wasn't laughing now. Neither was anyone else in the room. 12 years earlier, a scientist too stubborn to accept an answer had asked a question no one else had thought to ask. That question was still unraveling. It would not stop unraveling for a long time. Somewhere beyond Neptune, a man who had started all of this was about to find out what he had done. 6 months before the Chamber of Judgment, Dr. Marcus Webb stood at the observation window of Station Hermes and watched a test ship crawl back into its docking clamp. He should have felt triumph. 12 years of humiliation, 12 years of being the physicist who wouldn't shut up about a number that wasn't supposed to mean anything. And here it was, working. Instead, he felt cold. You're doing the thing again, said a voice behind him. Yuki Tanaka, 42, hollow-eyed from 3 straight days without sleep, dropped into the chair beside the console. The thing where you win and look like someone died. Someone's about to, Marcus said. Just not a person. An idea. A very old, very well-defended idea. Yuki didn't answer that. She didn't need to. Everyone on Station Hermes knew exactly which idea he meant, that the 8-light-year speed limit written into every drive core in the galaxy was a law of physics. It wasn't. It had never been. It was a fence, and Marcus Webb had just found the gate. He was 68 years old, his hair gone fully white a decade before its time, his face carved with the kind of lines that came from years of not sleeping and reading numbers until they screamed at him. When the Galactic Council had laughed him out of a public forum 12 years ago, most people assumed that was the end of him. Instead, it had been the beginning. A student back then had asked him a simple question during a lecture on drive theory. Why exactly 8 light years? Not 7, not 9. Marcus had started to give the standard answer, quantum foam density, structural tolerance, the usual list, and stopped halfway through the second sentence because he realized he didn't actually know. Nobody did. The number had simply always been there, handed down from the council like scripture, and every physicist in the galaxy had spent generations building elegant theories to justify a fence someone else had built. That night he couldn't sleep. 3 years later, neither could anyone on his new team. Station Hermes wasn't on any official map. It orbited the Kuiper Belt disguised as a deep space monitoring post, a cover story thin enough that everyone working inside it knew exactly what crime they were committing. 12 scientists, hand-picked, each one a criminal under galactic law the moment they walked through the airlock. James Akono had joined from a Nigerian propulsion lab 18 months in, bringing steady hands and a habit of humming while he worked that drove everyone half-mad and somehow made the long nights bearable. Sarah Vav, a quantum entanglement specialist from Novosibirsk, had the sharpest mind on the station and hadn't smiled once in 4 months, not until the morning the math finally closed. "Run it again," Marcus said now, turning from the window. "38th time, humor me." Yuki's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "It's not going to change, Marcus." "Good, then it won't hurt to check." She ran it anyway. The console lit with cascading equations, quantum bridge geometry folding space into a shape no galactic textbook had a name for. Sarah leaned over Yuki's shoulder, arms crossed, and watched the final number resolve. "Still holds," Sarah said. "The bridge doesn't touch quantum foam at all. No ripple, no signature. Whatever's tracking ships out there," she nodded vaguely toward the black beyond the window, toward Grand Convergence Station and the council that ruled from it. "It will never see us coming." James looked up from the propulsion bay readout, wiping grease from his hands with a rag that had long since stopped being useful for that purpose. "Energy draws clean too. We can run this on a fraction of what a standard slip drive needs. No exotic isotopes, no reactor strain." He grinned, tired but real. "It shouldn't be this easy." "It isn't easy," Marcus said quietly. "It's just finally honest." He turned back to the window. Far below and impossibly distant, Earth hung as a pale blue point he couldn't actually see from here. He just knew where to look. 12 years of his life had narrowed down to this moment, this room, these three tired, brilliant faces waiting for him to say yes. "Get Rodriguez in here," he said. "It's time we found out if this thing actually flies." Captain Maria Rodriguez arrived within the hour, flight suit half-zipped, hair still damp from a shower she'd been pulled out of. She'd flown test drives for 11 years and had learned not to ask too many questions about the ones that came from Station Hermes. "Tell me it's not going to turn me inside out," she said, dropping into the pilot's chair of the Defiant Spirit simulator rig. "Statistically," Sarah said, "we give that a 2% chance." "That's not 0%. "No," Marcus agreed. "It isn't." Rodriguez looked at the three of them, then at the small ship visible through the launch bay glass, sleek, unremarkable, nothing about its hull suggesting it was about to break a rule 20,000 years old. She exhaled once, long and slow. "Well," she said, "guess someone's got to be first." Behind them, unseen by anyone in the room, a secure channel light blinked once on Marcus's console. A message from Admiral Patricia Hayes at Earth Command, 3 words long, sent an hour ago and still unread. "Confirm test window." Marcus wouldn't see it for another 20 minutes. By then, the countdown would already have started. The message sat blinking unread, while 40 feet away Rodriguez climbed into the Defiant Spirit's cockpit and started running her own checklist out loud, mostly to hear a human voice. "Fuel cell nominal, hull integrity nominal, bridge core," she paused. "James, what am I even checking for on the bridge core?" "Anything that isn't glowing," James said through the comm, only half joking. "It's not glowing." "Then we're good." Marcus finally saw Hayes's message as he crossed the control room and stopped mid-step. "Confirm test window, 3 words an hour old." He typed back 4, launching in 10. Then he shut the channel before she could answer, because there wasn't time left to argue about it, and because some part of him didn't want permission. He wanted proof. Yuki caught his eye across the room. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The countdown began at 10 minutes and felt like 10 years. Sarah ran the bridge geometry one final time, watching numbers she already trusted resolve exactly the way they always did. James stood with both hands flat on the console, not touching anything, just needing somewhere to put them. Marcus stood at the observation window, the same spot he'd stood in 100 times before, and for the first time in 12 years, he found he had nothing left to calculate. 30 seconds, Yuki said. Rodriguez's voice came through, steady. "Copy 30. See you on the other side." 10 seconds. Marcus realized he was holding his breath and made himself stop. Bridge engaged. The defiant spirit did not explode, did not flare, did not do any of the violent things a dozen contingency briefings had prepared them for. It simply folded, the light around the hull bent inward at an angle that hurt to look at directly, and then there was nothing where the ship had been. No debris, no signature, no proof it had ever existed at all. Silence swallowed the control room whole. "Sensors," Marcus said, and his voice came out rougher than he meant it to. "Nothing," Sarah said. "Not on any band. It's like she never left." 5 seconds passed. Then 10. James's humming had stopped entirely. His hands were still flat on the console, knuckles white now. Yuki's eyes were fixed on a clock nobody had thought to hide, counting upward with nothing to compare it to. "If the bridge geometry was wrong," Sarah started. "It wasn't wrong," Marcus said, though he had no idea anymore if he believed it or just needed to say it out loud. At 6.2 seconds, the light bent again, the same impossible angle in reverse, and the defiant spirit was simply there, drifting exactly where it had left from, running lights blinking steady, as if nothing at all had happened. Nobody moved for a full second. Then the room broke apart into noise, Sarah's hands flying across the console, James shouting something in Yoruba that nobody understood, but everyone felt, Yuki laughing in a way that sounded closer to crying. "Rodriguez," Marcus said into the comm, and had to say it twice before his voice held. "Report." There was a long pause. When Rodriguez spoke, something in her voice had changed, flattened, like she was still trying to fit what had happened into words built for smaller things. "I saw the whole galaxy," she said. "The bridge didn't just move me. For about a second before it closed, I could see everything. 50,000 light years out and back, and I was there and gone before I even finished the thought. Marcus, I don't think I can explain what that looked like. I don't think there are words for it yet." Marcus closed his eyes. Somewhere behind him, Yuki had gone quiet, staring at the empty space where the ship had vanished and reappeared, as if she could still see the fold in the air if she looked hard enough. He thought of the student who had asked one question 12 years ago and never known what it started. He hoped, distantly, that the kid had gone on to do something ordinary and happy with his life, because nothing about this was going to be either of those things again. "Bring her home," Marcus said. "Slow and careful. We don't run this again until we understand what we just did." He opened the secure channel to Earth Command before the adrenaline had a chance to fade into sense. Admiral Patricia Hayes answered on the second ring, already awake, already braced. She'd clearly been staring at her own comm for the past 10 minutes. "Report," she said. No greeting, no wasted words. "It worked," Marcus said. 50,000 light years there and back, 6.2 seconds. No detection signature. Rodriguez is fine. The ship is fine. Silence stretched across the channel long enough that Marcus checked to see if the connection had dropped. "Marcus," Hayes said finally, quiet in a way he'd never heard from her before. "Do you understand what you just did? I broke their speed limit. You broke their leash." A pause, and when she spoke again, her voice had steadied into something harder, something that sounded like a woman, already 3 moves ahead in a game everyone else hadn't realized had started. Every ship in that council's fleet is built around the assumption that nothing moves faster than 8 light years a day, because nothing can. Their entire defense doctrine, their trade routes, their surveillance grid, all of it assumes that limit is physics, not policy. You just proved it was never physics at all. Marcus looked past his own reflection in the window, out at the dark. "So what happens now?" "Now," Hayes said, "everything changes today. I need you to keep this quiet for exactly as long as it takes me to get the Secretary General on a secure line, and not 1 second longer. Because Marcus, they're going to find out. The gravitational pulse from that fold didn't stay local. Every deep space sensor array in 1,000 light years just registered something they can't explain. And the first thing every one of those species is going to do is point a finger at the only species reckless enough to have done it. She wasn't wrong. 40 hours later, that finger arrived in the form of a formal summons, sealed with the crest of the Galactic Council and delivered by a courier ship that hadn't announced itself before entering Earth's system. A violation, technically, though nobody on Earth's side was in a position to complain about violations anymore. Ambassador Rachel Owe had spent 6 years learning how to walk into rooms full of people who considered her a curiosity at best. Nothing had prepared her for walking into a room full of people who were, for the first time, afraid of her. The escort of 10 Zenthuri guards fell into step around her the moment her shuttle docked at Grand Convergence Station, their scaled forms a full head taller than her, glowing eyes tracking every motion with the flat professional wariness of soldiers guarding something they didn't fully trust. The walk to the Chamber of Judgment took 30 minutes through corridors of dark polished stone, past murals depicting 20,000 years of council history, and Owe understood by the 10th minute that the length of the walk itself was a message. Feel small, feel young, feel how long we have been here before you. She kept her spine straight, and her pace unhurried the entire way. Major Park fell in beside her at the final checkpoint, his voice low. Ambassador, Command wants confirmation you're still cleared to disclose the drive specifications if the Council demands them. They're going to demand them, Owe said. The only question is whether I hand it over like a confession or like a threat. Park glanced at her. Which one is it? Neither. She stopped walking for the first time since the shuttle, just long enough to look at him directly. It's an introduction. They've spent 20,000 years deciding what humanity is allowed to be. Today I'm going to tell them what we actually are, and they are not going to enjoy finding out they were wrong. Park didn't answer that. There wasn't really an answer to give. Ahead of them, 2 towering doors of black stone stood sealed, carved with symbols older than written history on Earth. Beyond them, 73 species were already seated, already whispering, already afraid of a species that 12 years ago they had welcomed with the quiet condescension reserved for children. The doors began to open. The doors did not open slowly. They opened all at once, both halves swinging wide in perfect silence, and 73 species turned as one body to look at the small, unarmed woman standing in the threshold. Rachel Owe walked into the Chamber of Judgment like she'd done it 100 times before, though her heart was hammering hard enough that she could feel it in her teeth. The chamber rose around her in tiers of dark stone, delegates packed shoulder to shoulder all the way to a ceiling lost in shadow, and at the center of it all, on a dais lit from within by his own crystalline body, stood Archontholon of the Chuluth Collective. He did not rise to greet her. Nobody had expected him to. Ambassador Owe, he said, and his voice filled the chamber without effort, resonating from the stone itself. You stand accused of violating the foundational accords. 40 hours ago, every deep space sensor array within 1,000 light years registered a gravitational disturbance with no known origin. That disturbance traced back to human-controlled space. You will explain. Owe stopped at the center of the floor, in the exact spot every accused species had stood for 20,000 years, and did not bow. I will, she said, though I think you already suspect the answer, or you wouldn't be so afraid of hearing it. A ripple moved through the chamber, not quite a gasp, more a shift of 1,000 bodies leaning forward at once. Archontholon's light flickered, just once, quickly smoothed over. You are young, he said. 12 years a member of this council. Do not mistake confidence for wisdom. I don't, Owe said. I've mistaken plenty of things in my life. This isn't one of them. She reached into the small case at her hip, and the entire front row of Zenthuri guards tensed as one, hands drifting to weapons that, under the accords, they weren't permitted to draw inside the chamber. Owe noticed the movement and did not slow down. She set the black device on the floor before her, the same one that would, in a matter of minutes, put the whole galaxy on notice. For now, she simply crouched and adjusted its base, unhurried, the way anyone might straighten a picture frame before hanging it. It was such a small, ordinary motion. 73 species held their breath watching her do it. 12 years ago, she said, rising, you welcomed humanity into this council with open arms and 8 light years a day. You told us it was the natural limit of drive physics, a gift of your engineering generously shared. She let that sit. It was a lie. That is a serious accusation, Archonthalon said, his tone gone very quiet. It's a serious truth. Oe's eyes swept the tears, meeting as many gazes as she could in the time she had. For 20,000 years, every species that has walked through those doors has been told the speed of the universe is fixed. It isn't. It never was. It was a fence you built and told us was a wall we couldn't help but hit. The chamber had gone utterly still. One of our scientists asked why the limit was exactly 8 light years and not some other number, Oe continued. That question should have had an easy answer. It didn't. 12 years later, we found out why. She activated the device. The star map bloomed above her, vast and silent, red points scattered across the dark like a wound spreading. Every major system in the galaxy marked, and green lines running from every single one of them back to a small blue point near the edge of the display. Your security systems are built to track ships moving through quantum foam, Oe said, and her voice carried into every corner of the chamber without needing to rise. Our drive does not use quantum foam. We are invisible to your sensors until the moment we arrive. The words landed like a physical blow. Somewhere in the upper tiers, a Throne World Delegate's translator device clattered against the rail. Commander Vex of the Zenthuri went the color of old ash. Archonthalon's crystalline body dimmed by degrees, the light inside him flickering erratically, as if something ancient and steady had just been asked to hold a weight it was never built to carry. This is not possible, Archonthalon said. It's already happened, Oe said. 48 hours ago, a human ship traveled 50,000 light years and returned before your entire tracking network so much as blinked. You have spent 20,000 years building your authority on the assumption that no one could move faster than you allowed. That assumption ended 6.2 seconds after our engines engaged. A young cooperative union delegate near the front, one of the smaller species, rarely given the floor to speak at all, rose halfway out of her seat, voice trembling. If this is true, nowhere is safe from you, from anyone who builds this. That's exactly right, Oe said, and turned to face her directly, gentler now. Nowhere is safe from anyone who builds this, which means the only question left is who gets to decide the rules going forward, one council that's ruled unchallenged for 20,000 years, or every species this ever touches together. Archonthalon's voice, when it came, had lost its resonance entirely. It sounded, for the first time in 300 years, like something small. What are your demands? Full sovereignty for humanity within the Accords, an end to the technology restrictions imposed on new member species, and a renegotiation of every trade agreement written under the assumption that we would remain what you decided we'd be. Oe let the silence stretch a moment before she added, quieter, almost gentle. We're not asking you to give this to us, Archonthalon. We're telling you it's already true. The only choice you have left is whether you adapt to it or get left behind by it. That was when the alarms began. Not sirens, something older, a deep resonant tone built into the station's ancient bones, a sound the chamber had not heard sound in living memory for most of the species present. Every delegate's eyes went, as one, to the wide viewport along the chamber's east wall. 3 ships had appeared outside the station. No warning, no detected approach, no trace on any sensor array in the room. Freedom's dawn, Prometheus rising, defiant spirit. Unarmed, perfectly still. Simply there, hanging in the dark where a moment before there had been nothing, close enough to grand convergent station that their running lights reflected faintly off the ancient stone of the chamber itself. Nobody in the room needed it explained to them what they were looking at. It wasn't a threat. It was worse than a threat. It was proof, delivered without a single shot fired, that threats from this species would no longer require permission to arrive. Commander Vex was on his feet, scaled hand, white-knuckled on the hilt of a weapon he still hadn't drawn. Archonthilan said nothing at all. For the first time in the recorded history of the Chuluth Collective, one of its eldest scholars had run out of words. Owie stood at the center of the floor, small and steady, and did not look away from him. "We're not here to conquer anyone," she said, into the silence that followed. "We're here because you built a galaxy where the only way to be heard was to make you afraid enough to listen. We learned that lesson from you. I'd rather we didn't have to keep using it." Far above the chamber, unseen through any of its viewports, a fourth ship held position in the deep dark, dormant, unlit, its presence known to exactly 3 people in the galaxy. It had not come to threaten anyone. It had come because Admiral Hayes did not believe in sending an ambassador into a room full of frightened gods without someone watching the door. Nobody in the Chamber of Judgment would learn that ship was there until long after the vote that was about to reshape everything. The vote that followed took 4 minutes. It felt, to everyone in the chamber, like 4 hours. Archonthilan did not call for discussion. He did not consult the tiers around him. Though a dozen delegates had already half risen with objections they never got the chance to voice. He simply stood at the center of the dais, his crystalline body dimmed to something dull and grey, and looked at the small human woman who had just unmade 20,000 years of certainty in under 10 minutes. "You understand," he said, "that what you are asking cannot be undone. Once this council concedes that the Accords were built on a lie, every species in this chamber will ask what else was a lie. The order that has kept the peace for 20,000 years does not survive that question." "No," Owie said. "It doesn't. I'm sorry for that. I don't think I'm wrong to have asked it anyway." Archonthilan's light flickered once more, and this time it did not smooth over. Something in his ancient, unhurried voice had gone almost human in its exhaustion. "Say your final terms." Owie looked around the chamber one last time, at 73 species who, 12 years ago, had welcomed her people as the youngest and least significant voice in the room, and who now sat in absolute silence, waiting to hear what that youngest voice would demand of them. "The age of the council as supreme authority is over," she said. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. "The galaxy is changing. You can change with it, or you can be left behind. The choice is yours." 3 sentences, plain words, each one landing like a stone dropped into still water. No delegate spoke. No delegate moved. Somewhere in the upper tiers, the cooperative union representative who had risen earlier pressed a hand flat against her chest, as if the words had struck her physically. Archonthilan closed his eyes, an old gesture, human enough that it startled Owie more than anything else he'd done. When he opened them again, the light behind them had steadied, dimmer than before, but no longer flickering. "The council will deliberate on these matters," he said. "You are dismissed." The dais began to lower, carrying Owie back down toward the chamber floor, and she understood, watching 73 species watch her descend, that dismissal had never sounded less like a defeat. Park was waiting for her at the base of the platform, and the moment the great doors closed behind them, sealing the chamber's stunned silence away, her hands started shaking. She hadn't noticed them shake once during the entire session. They made up for it now, all at once, badly. "That was either the bravest or the most insane thing I have ever witnessed, Ambassador," Park said, offering an arm she didn't quite take. "I told them the truth." Owie looked back once at the black stone doors, already sealed, already ancient again in the way that only old power knew how to look. "Sometimes the truth is the most dangerous weapon there is." Neither of them said anything else on the long walk back to the shuttle. There wasn't anything left that needed saying out loud. 6 months of secrecy ended in a message 40 seconds long, and Marcus Webb watched every second of it from the observation window of Station Hermes, the same spot he'd stood in the night the defiant spirit first came home. He watched Owie's small figure stand alone on a chamber floor built for gods, and he watched 73 species go silent in front of her, and somewhere in the middle of it, his legs gave out enough that he had to sit down on the cold floor without quite meaning to. Yuki found him there when the transmission ended. She didn't say anything either. She just sat down beside him, the way she had 100 times before during 100 smaller crises, and let the silence hold what neither of them had words for yet. 12 years, Marcus said finally. 12 years, Yuki agreed. He thought of the student who'd asked one question in a lecture hall and never known where it would end. He hoped, again, that the kid had grown up to do something quiet and ordinary. He suspected now that nobody involved in any of this was ever getting to do something quiet and ordinary again. Tears had started somewhere during Oi's final sentence, and Marcus hadn't noticed them either, not until Yuki reached over without a word and pressed a folded cloth into his hand. The same rag James used on the propulsion bay, still faintly smelling of engine grease, because that was what Station Hermes had within reach, and nobody there had ever needed anything more polished than that. He held it and didn't use it and looked back out at the stars. 12 years ago, he had stood in front of a room of scientists and told them a number wasn't physics. They had laughed him out of the building. 6 months ago, he had stood in this exact spot and felt only foreboding, watching a test ship dock, because some part of him had already known what he was about to unleash and had not yet decided if he had the right to unleash it. He knew now. He'd known the moment Oe said the choice is yours and meant every species listening, including his own. Behind him, on a console nobody had shut off, a final line of text scrolled quietly across a display that had spent 6 years tracking every scrap of data Station Hermes could gather on Council fleet movement. It was the kind of detail that would mean nothing to anyone who hadn't spent 12 years learning to read the shape of a lie. 3 unregistered vessels had just left Grand Convergence stations, out of perimeter, running dark, headed nowhere the Council's own sensor grid had logged. Marcus didn't see it. Nobody at Station Hermes would, not for a long time. Some doors, once opened, simply stayed open, whether or not anyone was watching to see what walked through them. Marcus stood, slowly, joints protesting 12 years of long nights all at once, and returned to the window. Earth hung somewhere out there, small and blue, and no longer bound by a fence someone else had built. He thought about the fence a while longer, about how long it had stood, about how quietly it had finally come down. Not with a war, not with a single shot fired, just a woman standing still and telling 73 species the truth until the truth did the rest of the work by itself. Admiral Hayes was right, he said, to no one and everyone. Yuki looked up. About what? Everything's changed. He didn't say anything else after that. There wasn't anything else that needed saying. Marcus Webb looked out at the stars, at the vast dark humanity had just learned it could reach without permission, and for the first time in 12 years, the number in his head wasn't 8. It was nothing at all, just the window and the dark and Earth, small and blue and finally, entirely its own.